Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, February 9th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Rebecca Rubin on the weekend box office, which was muted all weekend by that big football game on Sunday. And Variety's Mark Malkin ran into Ted Sarandos on Saturday at the Directors Guild Awards, and they chatted about what else? Warner Brothers Discovery. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. What a weekend! The Super Bowl, the Olympics, and the Directors Guild Awards. One battle after another. We're sending healing thoughts to Lindsey Vonn. Watching the Team USA ski champion crash on her attempted comeback was really tough. At the Super Bowl, Seattle Seahawks quarterback Sam Darnold added the final exclamation point to his Cinderella story of being tossed around a couple of teams before he found the right fit. At the DGA Awards, Paul Thomas Anderson, director of One Battle After Another, won the big prize on an emotional night that also saw Amanda Marsalis triumph in TV for The Pit, Shannon Murphy win for Dying for Sex for limited series, and Rebecca Miller win for documentary for Mr. Scorsese, All This Filming Isn't Healthy. And then there was a surprise headline coming out this morning that also involves director Paul Thomas Anderson, and it's related to the Melania documentary. Viewers with sharp ears noticed that the documentary included a bit of music from the 2017 Focus feature movie A Phantom Thread, starring Daniel Day-Lewis and directed by Anderson. The movie's composer, Johnny Greenwood, asserts that nobody asked him about licensing the rights, and that violates his contractual rights. My colleagues Jem Oswald and Rebecca Rubin have the scoop. That story and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. If it's Monday, it's time for our box office segment with Rebecca Rubin, Variety's senior film and media reporter. She takes a harder look at the international box office this week because on the domestic front, it was pretty weak, as it typically is on a Super Bowl weekend. Rebecca Rubin, thank you for joining me. Happy Super Bowl Sunday.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I think in years past, this also might have qualified as almost a day off for Variety's box office reporter, in the sense that Super Bowl weekend is pretty reliably a slow frame at the multiplexes. Rebecca, was that the case this year?
Unfortunately, this year was no exception. It wasn't the worst Super Bowl showing in history. That was in 2024, but it was definitely a very slow weekend for movie theater owners. It probably didn't help that it's been freezing, really frigid temperatures across a lot of the country, which probably kept a lot of people at home, as did the Winter Olympics. There weren't a lot of new releases, and therefore weren't a lot of compelling reasons to leave the couch. For some reason, Super Bowl has just never been a popular time for studios to release new films. There have been some examples of counter programming. One of the biggest Super Bowl releases was the Hannah Montana Miley Cyrus concert film, which came out in 2008, so basically an eternity ago at this point. I think studios are just assuming that people are spending the whole weekend readying for the Super Bowl and then watching the big game.
It just tells you that people's mindset is not on the box office, and there's nothing super compelling to bring them there.
Correct. It was just depressed all around because there were not any new releases from the major studios. And so Sam Raimi's film Send Help, which is from Disney's 20th Century, was in first place again. It made roughly $10 million, and it had a pretty decent hold. It dropped only 47%. And for a horror movie, that is fantastic because horror movies can drop as much as 65%. They're known for being very front loaded. And so it's managed to stick around and I think benefit from there not being any major new releases this weekend. A new film from Angel Studios, it's a rom-com with Kevin James called Solo Mio, was number 2 at the box office. It made about $7 million. And Angel Studios has really carved out this niche of getting a certain audience to go to theaters, and audiences tend to love the films that they release. This film got an A- grade on CinemaScore, which is quite positive, and it has an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's pretty good for a rom-com. So that is one that actually did work as counter programming. It might not be blockbuster numbers, but it's a pretty decent showing for this kind of film.
It's so interesting to see these companies like Angel Studios, and there's also Wonder Project out of Austin, that they truly have like these integrated programs around movies and TV shows, and they thread them together, at least promotionally. And you're seeing that obviously around faith and family themes, around seeking a certain kind of entertainment. And of course, we saw another lever of getting people to the box office that was brought to a new height last weekend with Iron Lung, which came from a YouTuber at very low cost. Rebecca, how did Iron Lung do in weekend two?
That film had a drop that's a bit more in line with what we expect to see from a horror film, so it dropped 66%. That being said, it had a very good opening weekend, so it still made about $6 million. For an independent film like this that's self-financed, self-distributed, it cost around $3 million. It's an exceptional result. It's made $31 million to date, and so truly anything that it earns at this point is just gravy. Theater owners are making a lot of money from this. Mark Fishback, who directed the film, is making a lot of money from this, so it's definitely a nice success story.
What did you learn about how he got this into? It was upwards of 2,000 theaters. Like, did he literally get on the phone and call people? Did he have a rent-a distributor? How did he do it?
He released a YouTube video after opening weekend and said actually a lot of distributors had reached out to him and were interested in working with him once word of mouth started to build, but he decided to go at this alone. And I think that it really is a word of mouth success. That there were some theater owners early in the year, even at the end of last year, who told me to put this film on my radar and said that they felt like the audience was really going to come out for it. So I think the exhibition community actually not only was aware that it was coming out, but felt strongly about the fact that this audience would show up. And so even though it might not have been on everyone's radars, the community of theater owners definitely have been watching this one for a bit now.
It's awesome to see these absolute green shoots of wholly independent, very alternative activity. That's where the innovation is going to come from. It always does. All right, without belaboring it too much, because much has been said and written, but how did Melania, the documentary, do in weekend two?
It had a pretty steep drop. It plunged to the number 9 spot after being in 3rd place in its opening weekend. It made around $2 million, which is a decline of 67% from its opening weekend. So Melania did drop like a horror film, just to put it in context of how other genres tend to fare at the box office. Again, like we talked about last weekend, it's made 13 million domestically, which is a strong number for a documentary that's not about nature and it's not a concert film,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it cost more than almost any documentary in history, and so it's hard to tell whether Amazon's gonna feel justified in how much they spent. That being said, in what was a quite unusual move to me, Amazon MGM's domestic distribution chief, Kevin Wilson, he released a statement to address the second weekend results, and I have been covering the box office for Variety for over 8 years now, and I've never seen a major distributor release a statement around the second weekend of a film in theaters. And his point was kind of saying that the theatrical performance is validating their distribution strategy because it's bringing awareness and engagement and momentum before the film lands on Prime Video, and they're saying that this is a win because it's the theatrical window is the first step in what they hope is a long life on streaming.
Rebecca, let's talk about what's going on in the rest of the world. I know the international box office had some interesting results. What are you seeing out there?
There was a concert film called Stray Kids: The Dominate Experience, which is about the popular K-pop boy band. It actually managed to be number 1 this weekend at the global box office. It earned $19.1 million. A lot of that came from international markets, which accounted for around 13 million of that. Universal is releasing the film internationally, and Bleecker Street is handling the rollout in the US and Canada. It's a really strong showing for a concert film, and I think it did benefit from the fact that major studios sat out this weekend in terms of new releases, and so it was a nice little bright spot. They get to say they were the number one film, and it was also quite popular in IMAX. IMAX represented around 20% of the global ticket sales, and so speaks to a lot of the things that we have been talking about, but definitely a nice little showing for this film.
And certainly must be a nice little score for Bleecker Street, as they typically handle more art house fare. This seems like they caught a wave here.
Bleecker Street actually has a new label that's dedicated to event films, and so they're hoping to fill this void at the box office. We've seen a number of event films break out at the box office, whether it's a concert film or other genres, and so they're hoping to capitalize on that.
What's the movie at the international box office whose performance is impressing you, whether it's an American title or a local language title?
Zootopia 2 has continued to be at the top of box office charts. It was released 11 weeks ago around Thanksgiving, and it managed to place number 2 right behind Stray Kids, and it made $16.8 million globally this weekend, bringing its tally to $1.8 billion. It's the ninth highest grossing movie in history, and it's just continues to rake in the money for Disney. They've not announced yet that there's going to be a Zootopia 3, but I think that statement is coming any minute because it has just been a complete powerhouse at the box office, and it actually ranked ahead of a much newer Disney release, Send Help. At the global box office, it made $16.3 million. Just the fact that Zootopia 2 is managing to outpace newer releases speaks to the appetite that family crowds have been having for this film.
Doing the math in my head, 11 weeks is just about double the 45-day theatrical window that everybody's talking about these days. That's an interesting data point for folks. Well, before I let you go, what are you looking forward to next weekend, which is a big box office going weekend as Valentine's Day arrives?
The box office should finally heat up next weekend. There are 5 new films coming to theaters. One of the major ones that's expected to top the box office is Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights adaptation, which stars Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. That has been a film that certainly got people talking, and so definitely expect that one to outperform expectations. And then there are a few different genres. One is an animated film produced by Steph Curry called Goat. It's a sports comedy. And then there's also a starry heist thriller called Crime 101, and that is led by Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and Barry Keoghan. And so it'll definitely be interesting to see how all of those films play against each other because it seems to be offering something for all kinds of audiences.
Well, Rebecca, as always, thank you so much for doing the watching. We're looking forward to checking in next week.
Thank you.
And now we turn to Mark Melkin, who put some timely questions to Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos.
Thanks, Cynthia. I was on the red carpet Saturday night at the DGA Awards here in Los Angeles when I caught up with Netflix boss Ted Sarandos. We talked about his recent testimony before the Senate about the Netflix-Warner Brothers deal. I asked Sarandos if he's worried at all if President Trump gets involved or tries to have a say in the deal.
Look, I think he has a keen interest in the entertainment business. He knows about deals, he knows about the entertainment business, and he really does care about the health of the industry. American industry generally, but I think particularly the entertainment industry. So he has taken a keen interest in the deal itself. He's made no indication that he's going to do anything or be involved in any way that's improper. This is the DOJ's deal.
Sarandos is confident that the merger will happen.
Look, I think our deal to acquire Warner Brothers is solid on the merits. And getting across what maybe folks don't quite understand, just how competitive the marketplace is.
Right.
Both for where to put your project or where consumers are going to watch it. And it's never been more competitive. And it's a really wild West landscape right now.
Right.
And this idea that there's this, concentration risk in our deal is ludicrous. When you've got one player, YouTube, which is already 15% of TV time and growing.
Right.
So
Why did you try to buy YouTube?
Honestly, the beauty of the Warner Brothers deal is all the things that we're buying we don't have. Typically media mergers are pretty lousy outcomes because it's doubling up with all the resources, and then you just cut them in half and suck the money out. That's not what we're doing. We're going to nurture Warner Brothers and HBO and Warner Brothers Television and make those great brands even better for the next century.
I also asked Sarandos about the controversy surrounding the cancellation of Boots, the one-season series about a young man who enlists in the Marines in the 1990s at the same time he's coming to terms with, or at least trying to come to terms with, his sexuality. It was one of my favorite new shows of 2025, and like many fans, I was surprised when it didn't get picked up for a second season. There was some talk about Boots being canceled. People were surprised it didn't get a second season. Yeah. And people assumed it was because the Department of War went after it. Did that have anything to do with that decision?
Absolutely not. These are all business decisions based on audience relative to the cost of the show. Do the people who push play watch it to the end? Do they give it a couple thumbs up? Does it keep growing? All those things. That decision is made every day. And the beauty of why people get upset when you cancel a show is because they love them.
They are.
That's the best part about about our business is that people really love the product. And it's heartbreaking to cancel any show ever. Particularly a show that Norman Lear brought to me.
For more of my interview with Sarandos, check out my column just for Variety at variety.com.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. The Berlin Film Festival starts on Thursday, February 12th. We'll produce 5 print dailies out of the festival starting on Thursday. Much more to come on that, and look for those dailies being widely available on Variety.com and on our social platforms. We want to show them off. February 12th is also a big launch day for new TV series. Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette bows on FX. The great British comedian Dawn French is back in a comedy that Paramount Plus has imported from BBC One. Can You Keep a Secret features French as the matriarch of a very quirky family. And also coming on February 12th from Amazon Prime Video, Soul Power, the legend of the American Basketball Association. That league was extant from 1967 1976. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the ABA's merger with the NBA. Before we go, congrats to Eve Frederick. She's been promoted to Executive Vice President of Production for Unscripted at BBC Studios. She's been with BBC Studios since 2018. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin and Mark Malkin. Sticks, Nicks, Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety. 3, 2, 1. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the ABA's merger with the NBA.